Well, hey, how's it going? Welcome to Crime Dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So that's what I talk about. If you like true crime and you want to feel better about your makeup skills, you should absolutely like, subscribe, and yeah, come hang out with me every Tuesday where I take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old face. I hope you all are ready for today's case. Oh boy, it is a long one. It is a meaty one, and there is just so much to go over. So I hope y'all are ready. All right, I hope y'all are ready. Today, we will be talking about a case you may or may not have heard of. We will be talking about the McStay family, an entire family who disappeared and was subsequently murdered. And this is a long one, like I said. It is wild. And of course, so tragically, this is an entire family of which two of the victims were children, like literal, like babies almost. They were 2 and 3 years old. And man, I gotta tell you, even though this case has been resolved, there are still a lot of questions left. Lots of questions left. And I cannot wait to talk about this case with y'all because I am dying to know what you think of it. Absolutely dying to know. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the McStay family. So, the McStay family was Joseph McStay, Summer McStay, their 2 sons, Gianni and Joseph Jr., who was nicknamed Chubba, and their 2 dogs named Bear and Digger. It is said that Bear was Summer's baby, and she absolutely doted on that dog. So, the family lived in a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home in Fallbrook, California. The family had moved there from San Clemente around Thanksgiving time in 2009. Now, Joseph and Summer, they had actually met in 2004. They'd been together about 6 years, married for about 3. Their first son, Gianni, he had been born July 9th, 2005. And their second son, Joseph Jr., was born January 31st, 2007. Now, it is said Joseph and Summer's relationship started off very fast. The two instantly had a connection, and they were married shortly after Joseph Jr. had been born. The McStay family loved the beach, They often took trips where they rode bikes and built sandcastles. They were just that quintessential Southern California family. Now let's get a little bit into Summer and Joseph and who they were. So Summer, her real name was Virginia Lisa Aranda. Aranda, not Aronde. Aranda. Virginia Lisa Aranda. And she had been born December 27th, 1966, to her mother, Blanche Aranda. I do not know anything about Summer's biological father or her stepfather, just her mother. Summer had also gone by the name Summer Martelli, which was her stepfather's last name, and he had never officially adopted her. She had also gone by Summer Aranda Martelli, Lisa Aranda, Lisa Martelli, and Lisa Aranda Martelli. So she went by quite a few names. Now, Summer was described as not being too particularly close to her family, like at all. It is said that the day before her and Joseph's wedding, that she actually called her family and told them not to come. Summer had been married previously under the name Lisa, and her ex-husband had actually not known about that until their divorce in 1994. Like, he wasn't aware that Lisa wasn't her actual birth name. Summer was described as being very fiercely protective over her family, over her little boys and her husband. She was a real estate agent, and I read several sources that said when the events of today's case take place during this time, Summer was actually a stay-at-home mom with plans on getting back into work. And actually, both Joseph and Summer were licensed realtors. They had actually bought their Fallbrook home on foreclosure. On a homemade video that Joseph made of the couple's new home, he was describing like the pretty hillsides and just seemed to really enjoy the neighborhood, whereas Summer was complaining that it was a little too close to the truck stop and she wasn't too much of a big fan of the area herself. And the plan was actually for the couple to like renovate the home and then sell it in a couple of years so they could get closer to the beach, because like I said, they loved the beach. And they had come from San Clemente, which is the beach. Now let's get into Summer's husband, Joseph. So Joseph Brian McStay. He had been born November 20th, 1969 in Akron, Ohio. His mother's name was Susan Blake and his father's name was Patrick McStay. Actually, Patrick had met Susan when Joseph was like around 2 years old, and so he primarily raised Joseph, and he saw Joseph as his son and Joseph saw him as his father. So even though that wasn't his biological father, father. Patrick McStay was Joseph's father. Joseph's parents later had his little half-brother named Michael, and it said the two brothers were pretty close. And Joseph, like I mentioned, was also close to Patrick, saw him as a father and really looked up to him, and their bond was super close, even after Susan and Patrick divorced. Now, besides Gianni and Joseph Jr., Joseph did have a son from a previous marriage, a son named Jonah, and this was from his first marriage to a woman named Heather. The couple had married in their early 20s, had been together about 6 years, but Heather filed for divorce in August of 1998, citing irreconcilable differences. Heather was described as just being the love of Joseph's life at that time, and he was just absolutely crushed when the couple split. Though it is said that they did co-parent together, because Joseph did adore Jonah. He loved being a father, and Jonah actually lived primarily with his mother, Heather, and his stepfather. Heather had remarried to Michael James McFadden, and that's where Jonah primarily lived with Heather and her new husband in North County. Joseph was an avid surfer. Like I said, the McStays loved the beach, so of course Joseph was an avid surfer. He was described as just being a very laid-back kind of guy with a very chill sense, a chill mood about him, And like I mentioned before, he just loved being a father and doted on all three of his children. Now, Joseph owned and operated his own business, which was called Earth-Inspired Products. Joseph had actually started this business in his garage in 1996, and it had grown so quickly within its first year that the next year he had to go and rent an actual office space. Earth-Inspired Products made and sold decorative custom water fountains and high-end water features for high-end businesses all over the world. And at the time that the events of today's case take place, it is estimated that Earth-Inspired Products was worth approximately $1 million. Now, of course, owning and operating your own business, it takes more than just one person, and so, of course, Joseph had lots and lots of business associates, one of which was named Charles Ray Chase Merritt. And Joseph had subcontracted work to Chase. The two had actually met in 2007 when Joseph needed help with a water feature. Chase was a metal worker / welder. He had gotten his license, his metalworking license, in 1982, and Chase would help make the very sought after fountains and water features for Earth-Inspired Products, which Joseph, designed and sold through his business. Chase had a longtime girlfriend named Catherine Jarvis, and the couple had 3 kids. They had been together around 20 years, and they did end up separating, unclear of exactly when. Chase also had a record. He had served time in prison, though none of it violent. And it seems that it was primarily due to his gambling addiction. Chase also suffered with a gambling addiction. His first arrest had been in February of 1977, and that was for burglary. And then after that, he has a whole string of arrests for similar charges. Mainly, for burglary, criminal trespass, petty theft, stuff like that. The most he ever served, though, was 2 years, and that was for a burglary charge in 1978. And then Chase was subsequently sent back to prison in 1985, 1987, and 1988, each time for receiving stolen property. His last arrest had actually been in April of 2001, and that had been for burglary grand theft. He had admitted to stealing $32,000 worth of welding and drilling equipment from San Gabriel Valley Ornamental Iron Works, and he ended up serving 180 days in jail. And between 2001 and 2010, Chase did rack up an extended probation period, and this was for, constantly violating his probation, missing court dates, stuff like that. And records showed at least 7 warrants had been issued for his arrest during that time period. His probation had finally ended in September of 2010, but he did get a traffic citation in 2013, and this was for driving on a suspended license. Now, it is said that Joseph and Chase were, pretty good friends. They worked closely together and, communicated with each other quite often, and so, they ended up growing a pretty, close bond, that they were buddies. They communicated several times every day, doing the business, and the families would hang out with one another, Chase had even helped the McStays move. They played paintball together, barbecues, that kind of stuff. So that was the McStay family, and that was a little bit about Joseph and his business. So let's go to the date, February 3rd, 2010. So a friend stopped by the McStay home to help Summer, who was 44 years old at this time, to help paint her kitchen. This friend had stopped by to help her paint the kitchen. Apparently some painter that she hired to start painting the kitchen, I guess, never showed up. And so this friend was going to come by and help Summer paint it up. Because remember, they were renovating the house. So their house was super messy. Like they were doing the works. Because remember, they wanted to fix it up and sell it in a few years. So like they were doing, new paint, carpets, remodeling, countertops, all that kind of stuff. So this friend stopped by. I believe Summer and Gianni, who was 4, and Joseph Jr., who was 3, I believe they are the only ones home at this time. Now, this friend, his name was McCarger MacGyver. And McCarger had actually been the one who introduced Joseph and Summer. He had been very good friends with Joseph. They were former roommates and had tended bar together. And yeah, he was the one who had introduced Joseph and Summer in 2004. So yeah, McCarger comes over, and of course, like I just said, right, the house was in the middle of a remodel. So that means it was a mess, of course, right? There was like hardly any furniture in the house because it hadn't been delivered yet. Like I said, especially when you're remodeling, right? You're not going to want your nice new furniture to get, paint or something on it. And so yeah, there was like, plastic laying down everywhere, masking tape everywhere, especially with 2 small young boys in the house, right? So we're talking a huge like construction mess. What you would expect if someone's doing a major, renovation to the home, right? Now, McCarger ended up spending about half the day at the home helping Summer before he left, and he made plans to come back on the 6th to help her finish the job. And this is actually the last known face-to-face interaction anyone has with Summer and the boys from anyone that they knew. Later that day, Summer went out to Ross and spent $66. She bought some educational toys. And the next morning, February 4th, 2010, Summer spoke to her sister named Tracy Russell. She had just had a baby, and she made plans and promised to stop by and visit her sister and her newborn baby very soon. At about noon that day, Joseph left the house. He had a business meeting in Rancho Cucamonga with Chase. So he left the house at about noon, and he left in the family's 1996 white Isuzu Trooper. Oh, and I forgot to mention Joseph is 40 years old at this time. I mentioned everyone else's ages and I forgot his. Now, at this business meeting, it happened at a Chick-fil-A. They were going to be discussing some business dealings, some projects that they had going on. One of which was a fountain that they were building for a business in Saudi Arabia, and the deal was worth $82,000. At the meeting, Chase told Joseph that a check still needed to be issued to a stainless steel vendor that had done some work for them, and Joseph also handed Chase a stack of blank checks. Or did he? We'll get back to that. And Chase said that Joseph seemed very, happy and upbeat at their meeting, most especially because they were finalizing a new deal that would be worth a lot of money. It was a deal that would include 500 waterfalls, each of which would sell for between 17 and 18 grand, and the entire total deal was worth about $9 million. So it was a really big deal. And so, according to Chase, Joseph was, over the moon and, very excited when they left each other from their lunch meeting. Meanwhile, back home, Summer was with the boys. She went back to Ross and did some more shopping, this time for some beach towels, beach bags, infant clothes, and a jacket. And then she went home and searched the web and did a couple things online. She searched for homeopathic remedies for anger, specifically anger management medication. She searched Craigslist for children's toys, specifically educational children's toys. And she had visited the Animal Planet website. And we don't know too sure of when Joseph came home from his meeting, but we know he was home at 4:25 p.m. because an outgoing phone call was made by Joseph at the home. And this is the last phone call made from the family landline at the home. Between 5 p.m. and 5:47 p.m., there are text messages sent between Joseph and Summer. I don't know if they were both at home and just kind of like texting each other or something like that, not sure. Now, at 7:47 p.m., a neighbor's security camera catches the bottom 18 inches of a white vehicle leaving the McStay driveway. You cannot even tell what the vehicle is. You cannot see the occupants inside. It's literally just the bottom 18 inches. At 8:28 p.m., Joseph attempts to call Chase. And this call pinged off of a cell tower in Fallbrook near the family home. Joseph's call, though, went straight to voicemail. Chase later told police that he was watching a movie with Catherine and just didn't want to really, be disturbed. And so he had ignored the phone call. This smeared and now it looks like I have a black eye. Anyway, this missed phone call from Joseph to Chase is the last known communication from any one of the McStay family. Now, over the next 2 days, the 5th and the 6th, friends and family try constantly to get a hold of Joseph or Summer, but no one can get a hold of them. Patrick said he immediately grew concerned because there was not a day where he did not communicate with his son, and he was immediately suspicious and worried. On the 10th, so a week, 7 days since anyone had any known communication from the family, Chase, after failing to get a hold of Joseph, he phoned authorities and requested a welfare check. I read other sources that said he also went by Susan's home, Joseph's mother, to see if she had heard from him, and she hadn't either. And so the police conduct a welfare check. They knock on the door and no one answers, and they leave. Nothing looked amiss at the home, at the residence, and so cops just knocked, no one answered, and they just left. After over a week with no communication, on the 13th, Joseph's younger brother, Michael, he headed over to his brother's home. Like the cops had done, he knocked. There was no answer, and so he went around back and found an open window and got access to the residence that way. Now, I'm a little confused on if it was just Michael at this point or if Chase was with him. There were, conflicting, sources and, reports. Some said it was just Michael who had gone, and then some said that it was Michael and Chase. So, little unclear. Now, Michael, so we'll just stick with Michael because we know for sure he was there. So when Michael entered the home, he found no signs of the family. The family's 2 dogs were tied up out back or left inside. I'm not sure. Another conflicting report. Some said that they were left inside the house. Other reports said that they were left outside the house. But regardless, they were just kind of left with no food or water, which again is highly unusual because it is said that those dogs were treated, like royalty. On the counter, laid out a carton of eggs, some scattered coffee grounds, a rotten banana, and 2 sets of sunglasses, one of which were prescription, and they were Summer's. On their futon/couch, one of the cushions was missing its cover, and 2 child-sized bowls of popcorn were also laying, near the couch. Upstairs, the bedrooms were, pretty much empty and scarce. Remember, I said their furniture hadn't been delivered yet, and they were remodeling. There were some purses and a pile of clothes in one of the closets, and several children's toys and a little playhouse in another room. And in the garage sat the McStays' double-wide stroller with their swimsuits laying on top of it. And the McStay family, they never, ever left on an outing without that stroller because, they got 2 young kids to tote around. And on February 15th, so, after almost 2 weeks of no one having any contact with anyone of the McStay family, Michael finally contacts San Diego authorities, and he reports his brother and Summer and their 2 kids as missing. Now, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, why wouldn't he report that as soon as he got into his brother's home on the 13th? Well, Michael said that he had been hesitant this whole time to think that his brother was missing. He just thought that maybe they just went on a spontaneous trip and were just gone. And so that didn't really enter his mind, according to him. He just didn't think that anything was wrong or amiss. Now, after authorities went to the home the same day that Michael contacted them, so the 15th, they too thought something was amiss and they started working the case. On February 19th, armed with a search warrant, police searched the house and a pickup truck that the family owned. And this was 16 days since anyone had heard from the family. 16 days since anyone had heard from the family, the police are finally searching the home. Now, so what happened to the McStay home between the 15th and the 19th? From the day that the cops work the case, go to the home, and they're just yeah, something's amiss, let's go get our search warrants. Well, they had just left the McStay home locked up, hadn't secured it as a crime scene, hadn't classified it as a crime scene, didn't mark it off with tape as a crime scene or anything like that, because, according to them, there was no sign of a crime happening there. And so, in between the 15th and the 19th, those 4 days, what happened to the McStay home? Well, Susan, Michael, and a family friend went in and out of the home. Now, you might be wondering the same thing I did. I was when I read that, excuse me, if you think your loved one is missing, why are you entering their home? Why are you entering their home? Especially after cops go there, see, what Michael found was just yeah, okay, something's something's amiss here. Let's start working this case. Like, why would you go in the home? Well, according to Susan, she had actually called the sheriff's office before going into her son's home. She called and asked them, hey, is it cool if I go inside here? Like, I'm going to be messing with something? Like, what's the deal? And according to her, they told her, nah, dude, you're good. You're good. You can go on in there. And so, yeah, she had permission. And what did Susan do when she got into the home? What do a lot of mothers do if they go into their child's home and it looks a little unkempt and messy? She cleaned it. She cleaned the home. And I'm talking cleaned it, wiped down the counters using, bleach and cleaners. She took out the trash. She said the home smelled really bad because, there was eggs left on the carton, on the counter. There was a banana out there. She said the trash hadn't been taken out. And she said the house just smelled like awful. And so she decided to clean it up. Yeah, I know. There are so many missteps in this case, y'all. And we're just beginning with the missteps. So yeah, Susan cleaned out the house, like I said, sweep, mop, vacuum, all that stuff. Michael also entered the home, again, after getting the police's permission, and again, getting their permission, removed Joseph's laptop and SD card from the home. Yeah, the authorities told him, oh, no, yeah, you can go ahead and take it. Just make sure you put it back, though, before we get the search warrant. And so Mike took his brother's laptop and SD card and then returned it back to the home before the authorities got their search warrant. Yeah. When I read that, I was like, oh my God, what evidence, if any, was cleaned up because of that, Like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that. Now, when authorities did finally search the home, it took them 2 days. And yeah, like with Michael, they couldn't find any signs of forced entry, any signs of like a struggle or anything. It just almost looked like it was just kind of like a hasty retreat based on, all the stuff that had been found. Although documents later released revealed that there was a toppled lamp found in the master bedroom, and there were open and half-packed suitcases with clothes in and out of them in the master bedroom closet. All in all, authorities seized 17 items from the home, including cameras, computers, electronic storage equipment, thumb drives, cell phones, that kind of stuff. When neighbors were asked, they said that they hadn't seen the family in quite some time. They had actually started feeding their dogs because they noticed that they hadn't been home. That's why I'm confused on if the dogs were left inside or outside the home. Now, a search of the family computer turned up some potential clues, all right, some potential leads here as to what happened to this family. Now, there were searches going back to 2009 with queries about purchasing Spanish language software. These searches had been done via Craigslist. There were also searches from 2010 that had searches with questions regarding travels to Mexico and information on children's passports. Apparently, on January 29th, so just a few days before they would go missing, it is said that after a soccer game in Aliso Viejo, Joseph was seen talking to some strange men in the parking lot. But it was later determined that this little meeting in the parking lot was in regards to the Spanish language learning software that they had inquired about. When authorities put out a bolo for the family, they got a hit. Specifically, they got a hit on the family's vehicle. They learned that on February 8th, so just 5 days since anyone had last heard from them, at around 11 p.m., the family's white Isuzu Trooper had actually been towed, right? It had been towed for illegally parking in like a strip mall. This strip mall was located in San Isidro, I hope I said that right, in San Diego, and this is actually near the Mexico border. And in fact, this parking lot that the car had been illegally parked in, it is just actually a short walk to a pedestrian entrance into Mexico. It was believed the car had been parked there between 5:30 and 7 p.m. that same evening on the 8th. Some sources said that it was actually parked there between 5 and 5:30, and it is unknown where the family's vehicle was between the 4th and the 8th. Inside the vehicle, they found several children's toys, like a pottery barn, like kids' refrigerator, and like sink for a playhouse. Joseph Jr.'s birthday was being planned, and so it was theorized that those were probably gifts for his upcoming birthday. There were other things found, such as like children's videos, like there was like a Franklin Goes to School video. There were the 2 child seats that were still buckled into the back seat, and there was a plastic container found on the floorboard cardboard. And inside this plastic container contained Joseph's asthma medicine. Investigators also discovered that there was some potential surveillance footage, albeit very, very grainy and very, very dark. But this surveillance video, it shows a family walking into Mexico on that pedestrian entrance that I just told you about. And the surveillance video is time-stamped February 8th at around 7 p.m. And the footage showed one man walking, holding the hand of a young child. Behind him was a woman wearing a white jacket and Ugg boots, carrying the hand of another child. And it was theorized that this could possibly be a sighting of the McStay family. But it seemed like Joseph's and Summer's families, they weren't like wholly convinced. Some were like, just like, I don't know, I guess it could be, but like the footage is just so grainy and so bad, I can't tell one way or the other. Some thought like, I don't know, like Summer does have a white jacket and Ugg boots, like maybe it's her? While others thought like the man was too tall and slender to be Joseph. And what I thought was interesting, like if they assumed that this was, footage of the McStay family, well, that shopping center that the car was parked in, like was there no surveillance camera footage from that busy shopping center? And if there is, why wasn't there any footage of that looked into? Was there any other spottings of the family on that footage? Like, could we perhaps see the vehicle entering or at least see them walking along the shopping center at some point? You know what I mean? But no, that is it. That's the only surveillance footage that they had. And yeah, I've seen the clip. You may have as well. They released it when the family initially went missing. And yeah, I'm sorry, that's pretty pathetic footage. I don't know how you could identify anyone or anything from that footage because it's pretty pathetic. Not to mention, they think the car was parked there between like 5 and 5:30 or between 5:30 and 7. Like why isn't there other footage of the family again in that shopping center? Apparently that's a pretty busy shopping plaza. It's like literally right across the street from the entrance into Mexico. Chase was also shown this footage and he really wasn't convinced either. He said that Joseph, quote, moved like a duck and like had this like weird gait with like the way he walked, and that the man on the footage, it doesn't have like any of those features. And on February 23rd, the police alerted Interpol to be on the alert for the family. So given all the info that we have thus far, all right, what appeared to be a hasty retreat from the home, the searches regarding learning Spanish and passports and stuff, and traveling to Mexico, coupled with that surveillance video and the car parked near the Mexico border, authorities started to suspect that the McStay family had went to Mexico, possibly even South America. I believe also Summer was of Colombian descent, so they thought maybe she might have some sort of like family ties down there, but she didn't even speak Spanish. Joseph and Summer's family, they didn't buy this at all. They were not buying this at all. They were like, there's no way. There's no way they would just up and walk like that. Like Patrick was, vehemently denying that, like his son would not just up and just walk away from his life like this. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Patrick said even if his son were to flee, he certainly wouldn't flee to Mexico, because at the time, Joseph was actually pretty concerned with the uptick in drug cartel activity that was ongoing. And this was the same sentiment that was echoed by Chase. And he said that, like, Joseph actually used to take regular surfing trips to Mexico. He liked traveling there, but when there was an uptick in, like, drug cartel activity, he just stopped going altogether. And Summer's sister, Tracy, she said that her sister didn't even like Mexico or South America, that she wasn't even really a big fan. So it was just like, if they were going to take off, they would not be going off to Mexico. She also pointed out that Summer's passport had expired, and Summer's mother actually had Joseph Jr.'s birth certificate, which they would need for him to get back into the country. Joseph's family also pointed out that there was just no way Joseph would just up and abandon his older son, Jonah. There's just no way. And both families pointed out that Summer was actually just looking at evite.com for children's birthday invitations. And this was on February 3rd because they were planning on celebrating Joseph Jr.'s birthday that following weekend. He had actually been born on the 31st, but they were going to have the party a little bit later. And on the 3rd, computer activity shows that Summer was actually looking at children's birthday invitations. And they were like, if she was just going to up and leave, why would she be like planning this birthday party? And clearly they were planning it. Like, look, they had like all the children's toys in the car. It was like they said when they found those toys in the car, they were like brand new. And we knew there was like a children's like little playhouse set up in the house. And the toys found were, you know, like a sink and refrigerator for a playhouse. And so, yeah, their families were pointing to this stuff. It was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Blanche and Tracy, you know, Blanche, Summer's mother, they also pointed out that Summer would not leave her prescription glasses behind because remember, a pair of her sunglasses were left behind that were prescription. And they were like, there's no way because like she needs prescription glasses. She cannot see without them. So these glasses are very important to her. There's no way she would leave them behind. Susan pointed out that Joseph's asthma medication was in the car and there's no way he'd leave that behind because it's kind of important. They also pointed to the fact that like the car seats were still in the car. Like just like they've got 2 little kids in tow. Why wouldn't they at least take the car seats or the stroller from the house? And as if that's not enough reasonable doubt to think that the McStay family had like willingly fled to Mexico, they had about approximately like $100,000 just sitting in their bank accounts and it wasn't touched. There were no large withdrawals in the days before they went missing. There were no withdrawals after they went missing. Like it just didn't make sense. If they were going to take off, why wouldn't you take the $100,000 that you had saved up, you know? And yeah, literally everyone, all of the family and friends who knew Joseph and Summer, they were just like, no, there's just no way. You don't know them, but we do. And no, this ain't it. This ain't it. The disappearance of the McStay family certainly made the media rounds. It was a huge story here in California. It also made the nationwide headlines. They were, you know, featured on shows like America's Most Wanted. CNN did a documentary when they first disappeared. And I remember hearing about this case. I do remember when it first came up because I think that's why it gripped everyone's attention because it's like, this is an entire family. This is a mother and a father and 2 little boys that just up and disappeared. Just up and disappeared, like with no rhyme or reason. And like all this other stuff that I pointed out that the family brought up just didn't make sense. And like people were really left scratching their heads wondering like, what happened to this family? Michael set up a website to try to keep attention on his brother's case. He wanted a place where people could like provide tips and where he could also like kind of keep people informed with updates. He also allowed the media to tour his brother's home, and both Summer and Joseph's families had gone through and cleaned the house up even more after the police had done their search. And they all stated that they never saw anything amiss. They said, yeah, along with everything that they found that the fridge was fully stocked and the fact that the dogs weren't cared for. They're like, there was just no way. Like, we think that, you know, if they left the home, they were not planning on being gone very long, you know. And many of the McStay's family and friends actively searched for the family on their own, like doing their own searches. But still, no one could find any trace of this family. There was plenty of speculation, plenty of theories, but very little hard facts or evidence. Now, a former radio host who lived in Fallbrook, you know, the town that McStay's lived in, his name was Rick Baker, all right? And he became obsessed with this case. And he actually wrote a book about it. In his book titled No Goodbyes, one of the theories that Dick here poses is that Summer is to blame. Yeah, that she killed the family, that she was overbearing, and apparently he just pretty much painted her like a bitch. Apparently, from what I could read from reviews of those who read the book and who were following the case and knew about it, they said that Dick here inserted a lot of his own, like, theories and opinion into this book. He had been granted access to, like, I don't know, like, evidence and stuff, so I guess he took, like private emails that were from Summer to Joseph that were allegedly about Jonah, and I guess he presented them, like, out of context. I just dropped my brush. I guess he presented them just kind of like out of context, and I guess they didn't really have any real relevance to the case. He painted the emails as like vicious, quote, almost threatening. He said that some described Summer as maybe being a little overprotective of Joseph's time, that like she didn't like when he had to spend time away from her and the boys. And Susan, Joseph's own mother, she did say that Summer was kind of jealous of the fact that Joseph had had a family previous, with Heather and Jonah. And Susan said that Summer was a little jealous of that. But there were friends of Summer and of Joseph and Summer who said that that couldn't be farther from the truth, that Summer actually welcomed Jonah with open arms, that she had actually helped him build like a lemonade stand and stuff like that, and was just very sweet and doting to him. So I don't know. That's just, in this book, I guess Summer is just not painted in a very good light. Some thought that maybe Dick had a problem with both Joseph and Summer's families because he just did not paint them in a very flattering light at all, I guess. Some were saying that he went out of his way to describe how Summer was a, quote, tough broad and, was just, posing this theory that like, oh, she, quote, did something or had something done to Joseph and had taken off with the kids. He painted her as like hot-headed and vindictive and manipulative and just really did not paint her in the best of light. And was actually posing the theory that she had actually killed her husband and ran off with her 2 kids. But Summer wasn't the only one, all right, that Dick was trying to accuse in his book, all right? He had even accused Michael. He pointed out how Michael had handled some of Joseph's business affairs, along with his personal assets and stuff like that after the family disappeared. I guess, Mike was, making business decisions, doing, this, that, and the other, and I guess in the book, Dick was like, oh, did he know his brother wasn't going to come back? And, when I read that, I was like, dude, you do realize that just because he's gone, his business is still going. Business decisions still need to be made. And look, Michael does some suspicious stuff. He's already done something suspicious, I feel like, already, not reporting his brother missing right away. That was a little, weird. And we'll get into that, but at this point in the case, when the family's still missing and Dick is making these accusations in the book, it's just really out of left field. This is why I actually hate following cases as they actively break. You have people just posing ridiculous theories on information that they don't even really know. You don't know all the information. You don't know all the evidence. You don't know what the police or the investigators have. And it just really, really bothers me. And when Dick puts his book out here, this is the point we're at the case. The family's missing. No one knows what has happened. And to sit there and just print a book and just lob, maybe Summer did it. Oh, maybe Mike did it, his own brother. I don't know. It's just what are you doing? What are you doing? So Mike was aware of this book, and his response to being accused was, quote, "For everyone else, this is just a story to them. For us, this is real life. You try to take the high road and turn the other cheek. Unfortunately, a case like this brings out the bottom dwellers. People trying to line their pockets on the misery of others." Michael said that the money Joseph left behind, that him and the whole family had used that money to finish projects that Earth-inspired products had going on. So they used the money to finish that off and to offer Jonah child support. Patrick said that he and Dick were actually slated to write a book together about his son's case. And I guess Dick was slated to be the ghostwriter, and Patrick said that they had this deal that they were, about to sign everything and make it official, but at the last second, Dick backed out, and then he came out with his No Goodbyes book. Now, it should be noted that Dick denies all of Patrick's claims, said that they never had agreement, never had a contract or anything like that. I guess Dick's book was just very lazy, greedy, not very well researched, and I guess he just really tried to paint the McStay family as not a happy family, that the marriage was about to, quote, explode, and just really just kind of reaching for whatever's going to sell the book, Now, both Joseph and Summer's families, they were, of course, really upset and appalled at this book. They pointed out a lot of inaccuracies that Dick had put in there. Dick had even apparently traveled all over Mexico and South America looking for alleged sightings of the family. There was one alleged sighting of the family in May of 2010. A waiter at a restaurant thought that he had seen the McStay family dine there. So I guess a family friend of the McStays, remember, they were kind of looking for the family all on their own, the family and friends. So I guess a friend of the McStay family traveled to Baja California to, try to find any potential leads or sightings or anything. And when the family friend went to this restaurant and had shown shown the staff there a picture of the McStay family. A staff member thought that they recognized the very noticeable, unique birthmark that was on Joseph Jr.'s forehead, and so that's what they thought was the family. But this lead turned out to be false. And for years, the family and friends, especially Patrick, would chase down any potential lead that they could. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, guys. Like, this case was pretty popular. There were even sightings of the family allegedly all over the world, including in Belize, where Joseph did own some property. And the family, especially Patrick, they checked out every single one of these, and they all turned up to be nothing. And as time went on, and the case attracted, online web sleuths, people who think that they're detectives when they don't even have all of the information. And people started, kind of piecing together things on their own, thinking like, oh, does this mean something? An instance of this was, I guess, in the, I think weeks and days leading up to his disappearance, Joseph had suffered from, this weird ailment. He had, dizzy spells and stuff, and the cause was, unknown. So, yeah, there were people like, oh, does that have something to do with it? People were they were really reaching for anything, because there was no rhyme or reason why this family should disappear, guys. It was blowing everyone's minds, and people were just like, what happened? Joseph and Summer's families had a very difficult time not knowing what happened to the family. Susan still wrote her son emails, catching him up on stuff, just in case he ever came back, just in case he was out there somewhere reading his emails. Blanche got worried whenever the weather turned cold, and she would always kind of worry and think oh, does, my daughter and her family, do they have shelter, or are they warm right now? Do they have proper clothes and food? And yeah, I can't imagine God, not knowing that. And yeah, for a few years, no one knew what happened to the McStay family. And despite family and friends' insistence that the McStays would not willingly just abandon their lives, in April of 2013, based purely on surveillance footage, authorities stated they did believe the McStay family had willingly wintered Mexico and entered of their own free will. They offered no explanation as to why they would do this, no motive or anything like that. And it was at this point that the case was turned over to the FBI because of their international resources. And the FBI had actually been assisting with the case since the beginning, but yeah, now it was fully theirs. And then 7 months later, 7 months after authorities come out and say, no, they entered Mexico willingly, 7 months later, November 11th, 2013, at 9:58 a.m., a motorcyclist, he was off-roading, all right? He's off-roading through the deserts of Victorville. And where he's off-roading in Victorville, it's about 100 miles from the McStay home, all right? And so this motorcyclist, he's off-roading, and he's off-roading in the area between Quarry and Stoddard Wells Road, approximately 50 yards off of the main road. And as he's going about, he sees what he thinks is a partial human skull. He immediately alerts authorities, and when police get to the scene, they end up finding 4 sets of human remains. They were buried in 2 shallow graves, which were only about a foot or 2 deep, and they were located about 6 to 8 feet away from each other. And 4 days later, on the 15th, the bodies were confirmed and verified to be that of the McStay family. They had gotten dental records to confirm Joseph and Summer's identity, and then had done DNA analysis on Gianni and Joseph Jr. to confirm their identities. Joseph and Summer were in one grave, while Gianni and Joseph Jr. were in another. I read another source that said Summer and Gianni were actually in one grave, while Joseph and Joseph Jr. were in another. None of them were wearing shoes, and all of them had died from blunt force trauma, along with multiple skull fractures and broken bones. And these injuries were caused from a Stanley brand 3-foot sledgehammer, and that had actually been found in Summer's grave. The sledgehammer was rusty and had white paint on it, and I read one source that said the paint was matched to the McStay home. Joseph's body was wrapped in a white woven blanket, secured by red tie-down straps, and this white blanket turned out was a match for the missing cushion cover on the McStay futon/couch from their home. A white extension cord was wrapped around his neck, tied in a knot, and his hands were tied behind his back. Joseph's skull had a large hole in it, specifically in the back, that was consistent with receiving blows from the sledgehammer. He was struck at least 4 times and also suffered a broken leg and broken ribs. Summer had multiple jaw fractures. She had suffered blows to her face and to the back of her head, and she had other broken bones as well. It was initially thought that she may have been been sexually assaulted as well, because her jeans were found by her head and like her underwear was like inside the jeans. Like, you know, when you slide off your like underwear and pants at the same time. And so that's kind of how they were found, and they were found near her head, and they never found her shirt, and they were wondering if maybe she had been sexually assaulted. There were also small incisions on her bra that they found that also led them to wonder if she had been assaulted. And I'm a little unclear if they ever verified if she was assaulted or not. Little Gianni was struck at least 7 times in the head. 7 times. Who could do that to a little 4-year-old? 7 times in the frickin' head with that sledgehammer. Joseph Jr.'s remains were so badly decomposed and scattered due to wildlife that they could actually never really determine an official cause of death for him, but the skull fractures that he had led them to classify his death as a homicide as well. 2 sets of tire tracks were also at the grave sites, and they appeared to have been made from 2 different vehicles that they theorized backed into the grave site, which would make sense if you have bodies in the back of your truck, right? Like you're gonna back it up to the grave. The family had been there for quite some time. Oh, I also forgot to mention they also found blue painter's tape wrapped in a towel in one of the graves as well. Now, investigators said that they believed the family had been tortured, beaten repeatedly in the head, arms, legs, and torso, and they also believed that the family had been killed inside of their own home. But they did not give a reason as to why they thought this. Maybe because they found, like, you know, the blue painter's tape, there was like paint on the sledgehammer, the fact that they didn't have any shoes on, maybe that's what led them to believe that they had been killed inside the home. A few weeks after the bodies had been discovered on November 20th, on what would have been Joseph's 44th birthday, the family erected a memorial of 4 white crosses at the gravesite where the family had been found. 2 big ones for Joseph and Summer, and 2 small ones for Gianni and Joseph Jr. Now, this case had already been the subject of wild theories and speculation, as we went over a few. But after the bodies were discovered, these theories went into overdrive, okay? Overdrive. There were theories that Joseph had either intentionally or unintentionally, like, gotten involved with, like, Mexican drug cartels and, like, shady business dealings or something, and had, like, gotten in over his head. Some theories, going off of Dick's book, still suggested that Summer was the culprit and possibly had poisoned Joseph, which was why he was suffering from, like, those dizzy spells in, like, the weeks and days leading up to their disappearance. There were rumors circulating that I guess what fueled this rumor was that Joseph had allegedly told Chase about, like, he was afraid that his wife was poisoning him. Even Patrick, at first, bought the theory that perhaps Summer had something to do with it, like, could be poisoning his son anyway. But after doing his own digging, he was like, yeah, that's a load of bull. And I don't know why people still thought Summer had something to do with it even after the bodies were discovered. Yeah, I still saw that. Like, people still thought Summer had something to do with it. People really tried to emphasize the, like, quote, trouble in the McStay marriage. Apparently in January of 2010, Joseph had actually called his mother and asked for her help in selecting, like, a family therapist, like, / counselor. And actually 4 days before they disappeared, the family had actually all agreed on one that they really liked. But, like, yeah, based on stuff like this is why, like, I hate following cases, like, as they're breaking, because people are just so dumb with their theories. Like, you have no idea as to why they needed a family counselor. Maybe it was, like, a communication issue. Like, couples, families, people, like, individuals, they go to therapists for a wide variety of reasons, okay? Now, after the discovery of the bodies, Dick did pull his book from the shelves, and he did offer a refund to anyone who did buy it. He did admit that all of his theories were grossly wrong, and even though you still can find his book on Amazon, he has a long, like, spiel in the description box, like, saying, like, why you shouldn't buy it, and how everything in it was, like, super wrong, so that's why I didn't get the book. And then, like, yeah, I read the reviews about it, and I was like, I'm really glad I didn't get it now. So yeah, it is admirable that he, you know, took it down and stuff, but I personally never could find an interview or a statement from him that expressly apologized to Joseph and Summer's families for everything that his book did. I never found that. So maybe he did, maybe he reached out in private and it's just not made public. If so, good for him, he should have. If not, then yeah, it's still a douche. Like, he definitely owes them an apology. And it's also why I don't know, like, maybe don't write books on cases that aren't, like, solved yet. I don't know. Now, after the bodies were found, Patrick accused the San Diego Sheriff's Department of completely botching his son's case. He accused them of incompetence, of not following potential leads. Patrick himself had a couple of leads and, like, people that he thought may be at least potential suspects to look at, and he claims that the San Diego authorities ignored him at every turn. He accused them of just being so tunnel visioned about the family going to Mexico that they just ignored any other potential clues or leads. And Patrick wasn't the only one criticizing the authorities. There were many people criticizing, saying that, like, one of the reasons this case was fouled up so bad is because, yeah, like, also what Patrick was saying is, like, they were so confident, so sure of themselves that the McStays had gone into Mexico or South America that they just ignored working the case from other angles, ignored potential leads and stuff. Those were, like, all of the criticisms that the San Diego authorities were getting. Now, the San Diego Sheriff's Department, they claim that they did look into every lead, even all the leads that Patrick had. They really did try their best. Now, when the bodies were discovered, since they were discovered in Victorville, the case was then given over to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. When the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, when they get the case, they decide to take a look at it from scratch and try to work it from the beginning. And so they were looking at everyone as a suspect. And I mean everyone. They thought Michael was a suspect. So, in the early weeks after his brother had disappeared, Mike had evidently withdrawn money from Joseph's bank account and had sold off some of Joseph's property. Remember, we kind of touched on that earlier. People were pointing out this is kind of, suspicious because this is in, like, the days and weeks following his brother's disappearance when no one really knew that, they were dead or missing or what was going on. And so some people were looking at Michael, including the authorities, were looking at Michael. Now, Michael says that, he did all these things, took care of his brother's, like, business accounts and withdrew money and stuff because he knew that his accounts were going to get foreclosed on, that the house was going to get foreclosed on as it's sitting there and no one's paying the bills and all that. And so he wanted to liquidate some of Joseph's things and get cash for Jonah and, like, everything that he could get for, he claims, Jonah before, it all went into, like, bill collectors and foreclosure and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into some other suspects, all right? Remember I said that Patrick had a few suspects that he claimed that the San Diego authorities ignored. So one person that Patrick, the suspector, thought he was a person of interest was Michael McFadden, who was married to Heather and stepfather to Jonah. And he was also a suspect to some other than Patrick, including online sleuths and media. So apparently, a few months before they would disappear, Summer had filed a complaint with Child Protective Services. And this complaint was lobbied against Michael. Now, since these investigations are kept confidential, we have no context whatsoever to what this complaint was. However, it does look like Michael does have a criminal background that does include violence. It includes an attempted murder charge from 1998/1999. He has some other violent charges that include a couple accounts of infliction of great bodily harm to a child under the age of 5, domestic violence, burglary, attempted murder, and assault. His ex-girlfriend at the time said that Michael had broken into her house, threatened to kill her, and then proceeded to beat her for over an hour before she could escape. And she had gotten out of the house and escaped to her brother's house, where she called the cops. She suffered a 2-inch laceration to her forehead, a 3-inch contusion above her left eye, a bruised shoulder, and numerous bruises all over her arms and legs. Now, thanks to a plea deal, the only charges that Michael ever pled guilty to were assault with a deadly weapon, other than a firearm, and a criminal terrorist threat charge. And then as far as the, like, bodily harm to a child under 5, yeah, I'm a little unclear as to if that was, like, the same incident, like if his girlfriend maybe had, like, a kid in the house. I was unclear about that. And I don't know what, if any, time was served, or even what the conditions of the plea deal were. I have no idea. Now, Tracy, Summer's sister, she told Patrick, because remember, Patrick was trying to, find his son's family on his own, so he was, talking to people and trying to get some potential leads, and Summer's sister told Patrick that Joseph and Summer had actually received violent threats from Michael during the holiday holidays of 2009/New Year of 2010. She said that Michael had threatened Joseph to muzzle his wife, or he would come to his house, kick his ass, and muzzle Summer for him. Another interesting thing to note that kind of puts Michael in the crosshairs of everyone is that he's a huge off-roading fan, and he's a self-described like mountain bike racer. He had actually participated in all kinds of events that run all along the Interstate 15, and along the Interstate 15 is where the bodies had been found. Now, Michael, he was aware that people suspected him. He was aware that Patrick had, named him as a person of interest, and I think understandably so, he was a little peeved. He sent Patrick a Facebook message that said, quote, "Keep running your mouth about me, loser. I'm about to expose you to the world as the despicable, broke-down loser you are." Which, I don't want to say that, I don't know if I, blame him necessarily. I'd be a little peeved if people were just, out there putting my name out in the public like that and be like, oh yeah, I think they killed him. But finally, after, being hounded by media and online sleuths and whatnot, Michael finally did make a public statement. He said, quote, "I am Michael J. McFadden. I am not a criminal, nor did I murder the McStay family. My family is trying to get through this horrible tragedy as privately as possible, but I am growing tired of all of the name-calling and mudslinging towards me. I liked Joey, and he was my friend, so knock it off. My rap sheet is all from one terrible night in my life. That night was the last time I consumed alcohol. I have been a solid, productive member of society. I am a father, a husband, a business owner. I committed a crime years ago. That crime involved myself, my girlfriend, and another man. Period. I am not proud of it, but frankly served my time and never looked back. My family attends church and loves God. We love each other and have good lives." Which, yeah, so you'll, as we'll get into, guys, there are so many potential persons of interest in this case because everyone has a little something shady that, you're kind of left wondering, dude, could they have done it? But yeah, I can't imagine, trying to just live my life, run my business and, being hounded by, media and sleuths and stuff. Oh, that would suck. So another person on Patrick's list, all right, another person was Dan the Hacker Kavanaugh. And Dan was another business associate of Joseph's. He actually ran the, online part of Joseph's business. He, maintained the website. He was, the web developer and stuff. And even police had him as a suspect, because remember, they were ruling nobody out. Now, Dan was on some people's lists, including the police, because he actually withdrew money from the business account and Joseph's business accounts on February 6th. After the family was missing, but before anyone really knew they were missing, Now, Dan claims that he had permission to do this. He told Joseph's family that he needed money to keep up the website or they were going to lose everything, and so they told him, yeah, just do what you need to do, take out whatever you need to take, and Dan said that was why he withdrew that money. However, Patrick claims that Dan didn't contact him until the 9th, and remember, he had withdrawn money on the 6th. Dan ended up taking about $50,000 from the business accounts, and yeah, that led some to put him on the suspect list. Now, I did see an interview with Dan. This was on the CNN documentary, and I believe this was the documentary that aired after the family had disappeared, but before their bodies had been found. And Dan claims that he was actually the initial person who put out the alert that the McStays were missing. He said when he hadn't been able to get a hold of Joseph or Summer, he said he called Patrick on the 9th, so he does verify that, who also hadn't been able to get a hold of his son. Patrick then called Michael to go check on, Joseph, because I guess Joseph and Michael, they lived near each other. They were pretty close brothers. But at the time, Michael neglected. He was like, I'm too busy. No, I'm not. It's fine. We're fine. And he neglected to go. Now, interesting to note, though, that in the year before the McStays vanished, the business relationship between Dan and Joseph was actually deteriorating. So Dan, he wanted more money from Joseph for his services. I guess Dan had made it to where, if you searched, certain keywords, custom water features or custom waterfalls, stuff like that, he had arranged it so that when you search those keywords, Earth-inspired products was the first hit that you got. And he felt that he should be paid more money because of this. But I guess, Joseph didn't really think so. And now look, I get negotiating for a higher raise, knowing your labor's worth and whatnot. And yeah, Dan maybe was due to a raise being able to do that stuff. However, the text messages messages that I saw that Dan had sent Joseph, like, what a petulant child. They really show Dan to be very young and naive and not know how to have a business negotiation, not know how to talk about a raise. He send Joseph very juvenile messages, stuff like, quote, "You treat me like a kid, like I'm dumb or some shit." And then, like, yeah, when he was wanting to get a raise, instead of, talking like an adult and having a business conversation, he sent messages like, quote, "What's that site worth to you in your future?" And like threatening Joseph that he'd take away his whole livelihood and stuff like that. And just, what a child, dude. Like, that's not how you get a raise. That's not how you negotiate. That's not how you explain why you deserve a raise. Like, what a child. What a child. Like, I couldn't believe when I read some of those messages. I was like, really? So by summer of 2011, when the family was still missing, Dan actually sold Joseph's business. Yeah, sold Earth-inspired products to an outside business. And he sold it for only $20,000 cash. Now, Dan said that he didn't even really make a profit on this deal, okay? He said that the company told him that they would pay off any outstanding debts that Earth-inspired products had, bring everything to current, and would leave Dan with a very small profit. And Patrick was incensed at this, y'all. Very incensed, claiming that Dan had no right to any part of Joseph's business. But Dan, he said that he actually had a 50% share in Joseph's business, okay? And he and Joseph had made this deal from the beginning that he would get a 50% share under a, quote, gentleman's agreement. Translation, no, I did not have 50% share. I did not have a right to own that business, like a gentleman's agreement. Get the F out of here, gentleman's agreement. Give me a break. But Dan was ultimately ruled out by the police because he had an alibi. He was in Hawaii at the time of the family's disappearance. Another person of interest on Patrick's list was Summer's ex, whom she had actually been living with when she met Joseph. This man's name was Vic Johansson. No, Vic, he did have a history of violence, and according to Patrick, swore up and down that Summer was going to bear no one else's children but his own. After the couple split, in April of 2004, Vic got in trouble for allegedly threatening one of his neighbors and her daughter. I guess he was bragging to them that he was an ex-Marine and knew how to kill people, to where you could get away with it, and yeah, just being a real creep. Then they'd had no contact with Vic, right? Like, no one really knew what happened. And then 5 years later, when Summer's already with Joseph and they already, have their family, in 2009, Vic sent Summer an unsolicited happy birthday email. It said, quote, "I love you forever. Happy birthday, Summer. Forever and ever, Vic." And again, remember, like, Summer had no contact with Vic in all this time, none at all. And then just all of a sudden he sends this like creepy message 5 years later. Also, turns out Vic lived within a mile radius of the McStays. And in January, so after he sent that email and only a month before they would disappear, Vic was arrested in a bar in San Clemente for, just like threatening patrons, just being a general nuisance. This bar just happened to be next door to a building where Joseph had an office for his business. Now, after the bodies were discovered, Chase, he had also been a person of interest. I believe he was also named on Patrick's list of potential persons of interest. And he was, person of interest not just to Patrick, but again, to authorities and media and online sleuths. And after the McStays had been found, Chase actually granted an interview with the European tabloid The Daily Mail. Now, at the time that he did this interview, he was living in Apple Valley and working, designing gold prospecting equipment. And his Apple Valley home, where they conducted the interview, just happened to be 5 miles away from the gravesite. Chase described Joseph as one of his closest friends, how they had formed a close bond in their 3-year working relationship. He squashed any rumors of Joseph's involvement with Mexican drug cartels, saying that Joseph was one of the most honest guys that he had ever known. He said he did not know Summer was interested in learning Spanish, but did say that he knew that she had dipped her toes in learning like Italian and French, and he described it as one of her little, quote, little phases and fads. Again, I think trying to squash any ties that the family had to Mexico. In the interview, Chase described Summer as flawed, that she could blow up at the smallest things, but refused to accept that she was, like, capable of anything sinister. He described the McStay's marriage as, quote, not the perfect couple, but who is? Chase had also done a CNN interview for that CNN documentary that I mentioned before. This had been when the family had initially disappeared. And I don't know, it felt like in that interview he was a little more harsh on Summer compared to this 2013 interview that he did with the Daily Mail. In the CNN interview, he did describe Summer as being very jealous of Joseph's time, that she would constantly call him on his cell phone and Joseph would ignore her for as long as he could before he would finally answer. He claimed that Summer didn't even like when Joseph spent time with Jonah. And he said that Joseph, quote, put up with Summer's controlling behavior because he loved her that much. He even claimed that Joseph was worried about potential affairs that Summer was having. Yeah, in the CNN documentary / interview that he did when the family first disappeared, he certainly seemed a lot more harsh on Summer, seemed to kind of almost jump on that bandwagon where people were pointing fingers at her. But then in this 2013 interview after the bodies were discovered, his tone has changed significantly and he almost seemed to like defend Summer. That's how I felt, because I read the Daily Mail article first and then I watched the CNN documentary and I was like shocked at his two different tones when it came to Summer. I don't know, just thought that was interesting. Chase said that he spent an hour and a half with Joseph at their lunch meeting that day at the Chick-fil-A. He said that he had talked to him a couple more times on their respective drives back home. And he said the last time he spoke to Joseph was around 6 p.m. that day. And he went into a little bit more detail about why he didn't pick up at that 8:28 p.m. phone call from Joseph. He explained that it was never just a quick call with Joseph, that you were always on the phone with him for at least a half hour, and that he was tired and wanted to kick back and relax and watch a movie. And so he figured that he would just, talk to Joseph the next day. Which he did. And of course, as we know, Joseph didn't answer. And Chase claimed that he attempted to call Joseph for the next 3 to 4 days and could never, ever get through, which he thought was immediately suspicious because he talked to Joseph, multiple times a day, at least 6 or 8 times a day, every day, because, they were business associates. Chase says that after about the 4th day of no contact or being able to get a hold of Joseph, he stopped by Susan's and asked if she had seen her son, which she hadn't. He claims he then told Susan to call Mike and tell him to meet him over at Joseph's house because he was going to go check it out. Chase said Michael never called him and never met with him at the house. And Chase claims that he went to the McStay home alone, and that's when he saw the dogs outside with no food or water. He saw that they were outside, and so he got them food and water and then opened a shed or something into the backyard. So I don't know how he even got into the McStay backyard, if he had a key or if he hopped the fence. Again, also kind of confusing because, I'm not sure if the dogs were inside or outside because I literally read multiple sources that said both, so I'm not sure. Chase said that a few days later, he called Susan again, and that's when she called the authorities to do the welfare check. So I am a little confused on who actually called the cops to do the welfare check, if it was Susan or Chase. And this Daily Mail interview is where Chase said that he, broke into Joseph's house with Michael, and then they found all the stuff on the counters and stuff, and then they said that after they talked to some neighbors and see if they had seen anything, no one had seen anything, and no one had seen the family. Now, Chase also claims that it was at this point that he urged Michael to call the police. But Michael wanted to wait till the end of the weekend just in case his brother had went off on a spontaneous family trip. And in this interview, Chase reveals that, he was in fact a person of interest by police, not just, media or online sleuths or Patrick, but the police suspected him as well. He pointed out he's lost his entire business when Joseph disappeared, because remember at the time he was manufacturing all of Joseph's waterfalls. And after he disappeared, Chase himself went bankrupt. He said he and Catherine also broke up due to the stress. And he was basically trying to point out that he really had no motive to kill Joseph, that he was actually more successful with Joseph alive. And he also bristled at the description of his criminal background being, quote, extensive. And it's bro, come on, dude. You've got charges going all the way back to the 70s. I would say it's pretty extensive. Chase also revealed in this interview that he had taken a lie detector test way back when in the authorities, when the family first disappeared. He had taken a lie detector test. Now, at first he said that he had declined taking one, especially after talking to an attorney, but he later changed his mind because he just wanted, according to him, he just wanted them to move on, check him off the list and then move on so that they could catch who really did this. So what were the results? Well, according to Chase, he was told that there were, quote, a couple of inconsistencies, but Chase thought that was just the police trying to, quote, trick him. And then he said that he didn't hear from law enforcement after that. And then he ended the Daily Mail interview with saying that he expected law enforcement to be in contact contact with him very, very soon. And boy howdy, how true that would be. In November of 2014, after matching his DNA to some that were found in the McStay vehicle, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, they arrested 57-year-old Chase at his work in Chatsworth. He was charged with 4 counts of murder, with special circumstances of multiple murder, which opened him up for the death penalty. He pleaded not guilty, and later that same month, Chase's defense attorney, Robert Ponce, he announced that Chase suffered from congestive heart failure, and that the stress of this case had exacerbated his condition. In February of 2015, Chase's preliminary hearing was delayed when he dropped Ponce in favor of representing himself. Chase told the court that since he suffered from congestive heart failure, he only had 6 to 8 months to live, and he couldn't afford to hire an attorney. He thought he could work around the clock to do his own case. The judge did offer him a public defender, but Chase declined, again, saying that he believed that he could work faster. The court did end up granting Chase's request. However, before his preliminary hearing would happen in June, Chase would again switch his position, opting not to defend himself, and hiring defense attorney Jimmy Mateus and his team to represent him. In June of 2015, at the preliminary hearing, the prosecution laid out everything that they had in the hopes of securing an indictment against him. Though they do have a lot of evidence, as we'll see, it's pretty circumstantial. But, I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where, there's enough smoke, there's fire. So, they presented evidence that between February 5th, the day after the McStay family was seen alive, and February 8th, that checks totaling $21,858 were written on Joseph's online QuickBooks account, specifically his business account, under the newly created vendor, Charles Merritt. And this vendor had only been created on February 1st. The checks were backdated for February 4th, so they were printed between the 5th and the 8th, but backdated for the 4th, and the checks were then deleted as soon as they had been printed, usually within minutes of being written. On February 5th alone, checks totaling $15,358 were written on Joseph's QuickBooks account and then deleted. On February 8th, a man identifying himself as Joseph McStay, but whose phone number was traced back to Chase's phone, actually called a QuickBooks representative to cancel his QuickBooks account, and he was adamant that it be deleted. And not just deleted, like out of the entire QuickBooks system. It was a very unusual request, so much so that the representative who had talked to the supposed Joseph McStay was actually called to testify. From February 9th through March of 2010, Chase withdrew a total of $15,000 in cash from ATM machines in Pachago Casino in Temecula, San Manuel Indian Bingo and Casino in Highland, and the Commerce Casino in LA County. And the prosecution, brought this up because they were trying to depict Chase as really struggling with a gambling addiction, which he did. They stated that Joseph had actually lent Chase $42,000 to cover gambling debts and that he owed him still. He also owed $20,000 in back taxes. And the prosecution's witnesses, which mostly consisted of like officers and detectives and stuff, they testified how Chase had no explanation for these checks. He constantly changed his stories surrounding them, and he just did not have a very consistent or good explanation for them. He claimed that Joseph gave him a stack of blank checks at their lunch meeting. Remember earlier? That's why I said Chase claims that Joseph gave him a stack of blank checks at their lunch meeting, and that's what those checks were, which, Patrick immediately disputed. He's like, no, I know my son. There's no way he would just be handing someone a pile of checks, let alone a pile of blank checks. Like, no, that doesn't add up. The prosecution also claimed that Joseph was planning on cutting Chase out of the business. And why? Supposedly, the prosecution was accusing that Chase had shoddy work, was like cutting corners, and because Joseph thought Chase was pilfering money from him. Yeah, thought he was ripping him off. Around February 1st, Joseph had discovered that someone had gotten access to his QuickBooks account. And remember, February 1st is when the Charles Merritt vendor was created. Turns out it was Chase, and he had forged and cashed 2 checks, one for $2,495. I don't know how much the other one was for. They were printed and then quickly deleted, and the same pattern happened the next day on February 2nd. And Joseph found out about this, and according to the prosecution, on his way to his lunch meeting at the Chick-fil-A with Chase, Joseph had actually called his bank. And they claimed that at this lunch meeting, that's really what it was about. It was about Joseph severing ties with Chase, which they then said really pissed Chase off, especially now that Joseph's business was doing really, really well, and he had no other sources of income. They theorized that this confrontational business lunch meeting extended all the way to Joseph's home in Fallbrook. They theorized that Joseph and Chase got into an argument, that it got confrontational, And in the heat of the moment, Chase picked up the sledgehammer and killed Joseph. He then realized what he had done and knew that he had to clean up after himself, and he had to get rid of Summer and the children as well, and so he did. The prosecution pointed to the fact that Chase's cell phone activity was non-existent, was absolute nothing after this lunch meeting at Chick-fil-A, and didn't pick up again until later that night. And they were theorizing in this time period is when Chase killed the McStay family. Investigators testified at the hearing that on February 6th, Chase's cell phone had pinged near cell towers in Victorville near the grave sites. And I mean near the grave sites, y'all. Like, I'm talking about like right behind him. The tower that his cell pinged off of, it was called the Stoddard Wells Tower, and it's on like this little mountain that's seriously like right behind the grave sites. It's like right there. He had made 5 phone calls. Now, Chase's defense attorney, Matthias, he and his team maintained that Chase had a sister in Victorville, all right? And that's what he was doing up there. And that was why he was in that location. That's why his cell phone pinged there. But Chase's sister, Juanita Merritt, she told police that Chase had not come to visit her at all, and she actually hadn't spoken to him in quite some time. Although, it should be noted, at his ultimate trial, when Juanita took the stand, all of a sudden, she said, "Oh no, I don't remember telling cops that. No, I don't remember telling them that I didn't see him or whatever." Even though they showed her both the recorded and typed transcript of her initial talk with investigators. The prosecution also pointed out how much Chase and Joseph talked every day, including on the day that the family disappeared, and they pointed out that the very next day, when no one even knew that they were missing, Chase called Joseph 5 times, but after that, never placed a call to Joseph again. The prosecution was also trying to prove that that vehicle that was caught leaving the McStay home, on the neighbor's surveillance camera footage, was Chase's truck. And most importantly, the prosecution had DNA evidence. All right, they brought up their DNA evidence that they had found. They had found some of Chase's DNA on the steering wheel and gear shift of the McStay vehicle, so the driver's side. And this led them to believe that Chase was one of, if not the last person in the McStay vehicle. And Chase had told investigators he had never driven the McStay vehicle. He had never even been inside of it. They also pointed out that Chase was a longtime resident of Apple Valley, though he had lived in quite a few places throughout Southern California. And at the time that his preliminary hearing took place, he actually lived 12 miles from the grave sites. An address listed on a traffic ticket that he had got revealed his address to be in Oro Grande, which was 6 miles away from the grave sites. Like I said, I think he lived kind of like in different places all throughout that area. And the prosecution also pointed out that in the 70s, Chase had burglarized a home that was only 5 miles away from the grave sites. Basically trying to point out that, like, hey, where these grave sites, like where the McStays were ultimately found, this was like in the middle of the desert, guys, all right? Like an off-roading area, And so they were trying to point out that, like, Chase knew this area. He knows this whole area. There's no other reason for someone to be out at these grave sites if they're not burying the bodies, because there's nothing out there. But, it wasn't all hopeless for the defense. So the prosecution and investigators, they had neglected to test the sledgehammer, guys. They neglected to test what they theorized was the murder weapon for DNA. Yeah. And according to the defense, the paint on the sledgehammer was not a match to the McStay family home. So I'm a little unclear on if that paint on the sledgehammer was actually matched to the McStay paint from their home. I'm unclear about that. The defense also pointed out that the tire tracks that the prosecution said matched Chase's truck only matched the truck's axle width, and literally thousands of trucks had that same axle width. The defense also brought up that there was another set of tire tracks at those grave sites, and that was a point that the prosecution didn't even touch on. Chase, though, was ultimately indicted on 4 counts of murder, and he headed to trial, but it would be quite a journey before his case would even get to trial. So in January of 2016, Chase's trial was delayed when he dismissed Matthias and his team. Chase says that he was insistent on going to trial by April, but his team told him, like, his lawyers were telling him, like, we don't have enough time. We can't prepare that long. We don't have enough time to prepare in that short of time span. So on February 2nd, the court granted Chase's request to, again, represent himself. But by the 11th, so like a little over a week later, he was reconsidering his decision and trying to hire back one of Matthias's team, Rajan Malin, and he was trying to to hire a former San Bernardino prosecutor turned defense attorney, James McGee. But Chase told the court that he was struggling with funds at that time. In the end, he did secure Moline and McGee for his representation. In May of 2018, Chase's attorneys tried to get evidence thrown out, including those QuickBook accounts and those records, that show that the checks were printed and written. They tried to get that tossed out because, damn, dude, that evidence is damning. They tried to argue that only Joseph could verify, his own business accounts, and he obviously couldn't do that. And so, these records were hearsay. Okay. But the judge didn't agree. And Chase's trial finally began January 7th, 2019, and would last 6 months. So at the trial, the prosecution brought forth, all the evidence that we have discussed thus far. And the defense couldn't even play the bombshell that they wanted to. So the defense, they had wanted at trial to claim not only that someone else killed the McStay family, but they knew who it was. And that was Dan Kavanaugh, all right? They wanted at trial, they wanted to bring into evidence Dan Kavanaugh as a suspect, that he actually did it. So apparently, Dan's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Tracy Risobin, I don't know if that's how you say her last name, but Tracy, let's call her Tracy. She went to the police with quite a tale to tell, all right? She had quite a story. So she had known Dan for 10 years as friends, but I believe at, one point in time they were, dating. So a couple of weeks prior to her going to the police with this tale, she said Dan had supposedly told her how he had killed the McStay family and framed Chase for it. Tracy claimed that Dan told her that he started with Summer, he put a rope around her neck, and held a Swiss Army-type switchblade to her throat. He told Joseph to go, quote, take a hike with the kids, then told Summer to, quote, assume the position, and forced her on her knees. He then sexually assaulted her twice, and he told Tracy that there should actually be DNA on one of the grave sites because he actually finished twice. She also said that on the night of the 5th, Dan had come home and his shoes were super muddy. Apparently had rained and the ground was super mushy and muddy, and he had just buried the bodies, I guess. And Tracy was telling police that as soon as he got home, he took a shower and that they needed to check Dan's shower because there could be DNA evidence there. Now, the defense thought that this little fact was important because I guess nobody knew that it was raining that night, the night of the 5th, and nothing about that fact had been reported to media. However, like I said, the jury heard none of this. They heard none of Tracy's little story or anything because the judge tossed it out. He was like, no, what are you doing? No, you can't put someone else on trial. Chase is on trial. You can't put this Dan Kavanaugh on trial. So her recorded interview with police was never heard or seen by the jury. This whole angle of the defense was never even heard by the jury. And investigators said that they did interview Tracy and that, in the end, they concluded that she was unreliable. I know one investigator said that they saw some marks on her that made her think that she was having a problem with drugs, and so perhaps that is what fueled her tale. But yeah, she was considered an unreliable witness. And the defense did try to subpoena Dan Kavanaugh to at least have him, testify. But get this, no one can find him. No one can find Dan Kavanaugh. He is disappeared. No one knows where he is. Now, the defense tried to bring in character witnesses to show that, their client wasn't violent and he couldn't have done this. Because remember, dude, Joseph Jr. and Gianni were 2, 3 years old? 4 years old? They were young little babies. That's a cold-hearted SOB to do that, And so the defense was trying to bring in character witnesses to show that, look, our client is not violent. They called Catherine, his long-term partner, to the stand. And she testified how in the near 20 years that they were together, she never saw him get violent, never seen him raise a voice. She explained how one time she was super angry and pissed off with him, and she actually shoved him up against a bookshelf and was getting physical with him, and even then he never raised a hand to her. And she was the one to testify and verify Chase's alibi that night. She said that she didn't know what time Chase had gotten home that day, but there was still light out, so somewhere between 5 and 7, and that he didn't go back out that night. And she also testified to witnessing the missed call from Joseph. And she said Chase not answering his phone was actually the cause of many arguments between them, and that's why she remembered this incident. And she remembered looking over and seeing Joseph McStay and kind of hounding him why don't you just answer and get whatever it is he needs to discuss with you over with. However, the problem with Catherine's testimony here is that this missed call from Joseph is not on Chase's phone records. Now, the prosecution was theorizing the reason it didn't show up was that Chase had made that phone call to himself using Joseph's phone, but didn't leave it on long enough for it to register the call, and that is why the call shows up on Joseph's end, shows up on his phone records, but that missed call does not show up on Chase's phone records. And Chase was also now changing his tune about that missed call from Joseph. He said that, now, he actually didn't remember getting that phone call, and he wasn't sure if he had or not, and that he was taking Catherine's word for it that he had gotten it because, quote, she has a good memory. The prosecution also showed audio recordings of visits that Chase had with Catherine as he was sitting behind bars. And in these conversations, it showed that Chase was trying to sort of coax Catherine, kind of coach her and kind of tell her what to say on the stand without being blatant about it. And this actually proved to be a pretty devastating blow to the defense. Chase later told an interview that he wanted to, quote, slap the prosecutor, who was a woman, by the way, when she brought that out. And he claims that she misrepresented and misconstrued 80 to 90% of those phone conversations, even though they weren't edited. Again, going with the character witnesses, the defense tried to bring in Chase's oldest daughter, Taylor, to testify, and like her mother, she claimed that she saw the phone call from Joseph as well, and that it came in at 8:28 p.m. However, when she had been interviewed way back when, so she was 12 or 13, well old enough. When she was interviewed back then, she told police that she had not seen nor witnessed any phone call from Joseph. And there was no mention of this fact that she saw this missed phone call from Joseph. She did not let this drop until her testimony for the defense. So yeah, obviously trying to lie for her dad. Now, the ongoing theory from prosecutors and the investigators, right, were that the McStay family were murdered in their own home, right? Even though there's no blood or DNA evidence that was ever found or collected. But, so at trial, right, they're preparing for another day at trial, and one of the people on the prosecutor's team were looking at some of the crime scene photographs that they were going to present. And one of them noticed that, dude, look at this corner of the table in the kitchen room. Does this look like blood spatter to you? And when they brought in the original forensic processor who would actually process the McStay home, when she was put on the stand, she was horrified to see that she may have missed potential evidence, because she testified that yeah, those look like blood spatter on the table. Now, the defense clapped back that that's not blood spatter. That's the natural pattern to this type of wood that the table is. That's not blood spatter. And unfortunately, we'll never be able to test that table because it was sold at auction and it has never been found. The defense also claimed to have found DNA profiles from the grave sites that did not match the McStay family or Chase, which is, I think, why they wanted to bring in Tracy's testimony, because remember, she was telling police that Dan told her that he had assaulted Summer at those grave sites and left DNA behind. So I think that's why they were trying to argue that Dan Kavanaugh point. Now, in order to collect that DNA from the grave sites, the defense had used an MVAC. Remember that MVAC that we talked about in February with the unsolved Valentine's Day murders? It's this machine thing that can pretty much extract DNA from very hard to get places like corners, like ropes and stuff like that. And so the defense had said, using an MVAC, they had found DNA at the grave sites. And after eliminating the McStay family and Chase, they had come back with 3 partial profiles. Apparently they had collected some DNA from the cord that bound Joseph, and the defense wanted the prosecution to run these profiles through CODIS, because the defense wasn't allowed to, only the prosecution was allowed to request that, but they refused. The prosecution argued that there just was not enough DNA profile there for them to run through CODIS, that the algorithm and the computer would have to make too many guesses to fill in those gaps, and so it couldn't be done. And they also found the whole thing dubious, and they found it suspicious that they didn't find any of Joseph's DNA, and they're wait a minute, you took this DNA from the cords that bound him, wouldn't you have found Joseph's as well? And finally, on June 10th, 2019, after all of that was brought up at trial, Chase was found guilty of murdering the McStay family. On the 24th, the jury returned a sentence of life without parole for the death of Joseph, but returned 3 death sentences for the murders of Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr. Chase maintained his innocence at sentencing and accused prosecutors of framing him, of manipulating evidence, of falsifying evidence, falsifying documents and records. He went off on the judge saying that he allowed it to happen. He said, quote, "I loved Joseph. He was a big part of my life and my family's life. I would never have hurt him in any way. I would have never raised my hand for a woman or a child. I did not do this thing. But Joseph and Summer's families, they weren't convinced. They're pretty convinced that the prosecution got the right guy. In her victim impact statement, Susan kind of really, went off on Chase, saying, quote, "How could you beat two precious little babies? How scared were they, Chase? Crying for mommy and daddy. Chase, you are a low-life baby killer." And in January of 2020, Judge Michael Smith upheld the jury's decision. And this was despite many motions from Chase's defense attorneys trying to claim, the prosecution of misconduct, of accusing Chase's earlier attorneys of incompetence and not representing him properly, and even trying to get the judge himself thrown off the case, clearly grasping at straws, as is their job, right? Trying to get their client off of death row. But all of their motions were denied. Chase maintains his innocence to this day and is currently sitting on death row at San Quentin State Prison. And it should be noted that even though he's on death row, the state of California has not executed anyone since 2006. And it should be noted there are some who think Chase is innocent, his family and friends, obviously. But there are also, people who look at these cases, and there are some who think Chase is innocent. And that's why I'm super curious to know, what do you all think of this case? What do you all think of this case? Like, do you think they got the right guy? Do you think they got Chase? I gotta tell you, when I started reading this case and started reading the articles and the interviews and stuff, I was like, man, I was really shocked when the result was that, they arrested Chase for it. I was like, that's so weird. That seems so random to me. But I don't know. I ended up watching a couple of documentaries about this. I watched that CNN documentary, and then I was able to watch a good chunk of that Two Shallow Graves documentary. Someone had uploaded it on YouTube, and I was only able to watch 5 parts of it before YouTube took it down. But after watching those documentaries and just seeing the interviews with Chase, I don't know. I think they may have gotten the right guy. My question is if he had help. You're telling me one guy killed 4 people and moved their bodies by himself? There's 2 tire tracks at the grave sites. I figured maybe Chase had help or something. I don't know. Just in the interviews, he had no good answers for the QuickBooks things or any of really damning questions. He did not have good answers for them. I don't think he answered it very well. The fact that his sister and his ex-partner, Catherine, and his daughter, Taylor, all lied. All lied, saying that, oh no, Chase saw me all the time, or oh no, yeah, I witnessed that phone call from Joseph. Don't do that. If you think he's fucking innocent, don't lie and perjure yourself. All 3 of those bitches lied. They lied. I watched the trial of this. I watched them on stand. They were clearly lying. They're not good actresses. Chase thinks that Dan is the one who, if he didn't actually commit these murders himself, he had people do it for him. So, I don't know. Yeah, this case, just so many twists and turns, so many shady people, potential shady suspects and persons of interest in this case. I don't know, this is a wild one. Please tell me, I am just dying to know, what do you think? Did they catch the right guy? I gotta say, man, the QuickBooks thing and the cell phone tower thing, his cell phone pinging, those were 2 very damning things. And then when I saw his ex-partner, his sister, and his daughter on stand lying for him, I was like, oh. But yeah, please tell me, what are your thoughts on this case? I told you it was a long one today. I told you. And yeah, did another bold lipstick choice here. I don't know how much I'm digging it. I mean, it's funny. I don't know. It's funny. I'm weird. It's okay. I'm not going anywhere. It's fine. But yeah, that was the McStay family, y'all. That was this week's case. Please tell me what you think about this case. I am so curious to know what your thoughts are. Because, yeah, it was... That was a wild one. All right, y'all, that will do it for me for this week for Crime Dive. I hope you take care of yourself out there. Stay safe. Remember, don't be a dick. Just be a cool cat. Just makes life so much easier, not just for yourself, but for everyone. And I will see you here next week for another long, meaty one, guys. All right, I've got another long one for you. All right, I hope you take care of yourself, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.